So according to Wikipedia, which is always telling it never
Always
lies to me.
true. Always right.
All right. So it tells me you were the head writer. How'd they give the keys of the car to you? What did you do? How did you get this like an extremely important gig?
20 years ago, again, a great question. And that exact fact hit me last night, because that's the first show I was ever the head writer of, was that broadcast, which was on every network in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason was that Joel Gallen, who the only writing I'd ever done was we had done in 1994 a Rolling Stone year in review show on Fox. And if you can find it, please send me a copy, because I don't have one. And it was rather low rated because they made the very bad decision not to have a host, so that it was literally just me off camera interviewing, like I think I did half or most of the interviews, but it was like Spielberg, Howard Stern, Katie Lang. I don't know. It was just like a thrown together Rolling Stone year in review show. But during the interviews, I think I said a joke to Spielberg or said something that made him laugh. And Joel Gallen said, despite all appearances on this show, he said, "You're funny. Why don't you write jokes on the MTV Awards, which I produce?" So my first time I ever walked into a writer's room, I think it was movie awards or film awards or MTV VMAs, whatever it was. I walked into a room and it was me. It was Louis C.K. I think it was Bob Odenkirk and David Cross. So, and you can only imagine how happy they were to see me. but that was, I'd written like for a couple of those shows. And then in 2001, on the Thursday night before the Grammys, which are on a Sunday night, Ken Ehrlich called me and said, would you like to write I got left a message saying, would you like to write the Grammys? Now that was in the days of answering machines. And I, whatever reason, didn't hear the message until Friday morning. So we're now talking 2 days before the Grammys. And I got the message and I called him back and I said, do you mean this year's Grammys, like the one in 2 days? And what had happened, if I remember correctly, was that I think Whoopi Goldberg was supposed to host the show. And then whatever, I think she got sick or something happened. And at the last minute, it became Jon Stewart. And so I was thrown, and the absolute truth is I had a weird gig interviewing rock stars at Universal Records in Santa Monica on Friday and Saturday. It was like interviewing like a bunch of them. And so he said, are you available the next 48 hours to write the Grammys with me? And I went, absolutely, which was a lie, because I absolutely was not available.
Did you realize it is 48 hours, like no sleep, I'm sure, right? Straight 48 hours. When they say 48 hours.
A trend. I haven't slept since that call.
Yeah.
But he literally said, I said, absolutely. And he goes, okay, come down and meet with Jon Stewart and tomorrow. And I believe I went down to the Staples Center and I met with Jon Stewart and his other writers at the time for John's host stuff. He had Adam Carolla and Jimmy Kimmel, who were then like the man show. Right. And so it's like me, I walked into a room with them and I went to John, who I had not met, I don't think at that point, and I said, John, I want you to know, I'm here for you. I'll just be down the hall. I immediately walked down the hall, got back into my car and left and went to Santa Monica to interview a rock star, and then drove back and forth like a 60s movie where you have like two girls in two rooms and you're like
got a date with two.
And for the next 48 hours, and thank God one of those days was like, a holiday or something. There was no traffic, but I was just going back and forth on the 10, trying to help Ken write the Grammys and interview rock stars. And that was, I've been writing the Grammys since then. So this is my 20th anniversary at the Grammys. And that was the only show I'd ever really, network show I'd ever written before I was asked to be the head writer. So your question was, it was just because I think Joel had my number. Because if you remember, 9/11 was on a Tuesday. This was Friday night. He got a call from the I think it was Jimmy Iovine, but saying all the networks are going to do this telethon. And then he called me and goes, can you be my head writer? And I said, yes, because I've learned that's the most important thing, is just always say yes, even if
Yes,
it's a lie.
yes,
Yeah, I'm definitely, are you qualified to do this? Yes, which was definitely no. But like all sorts of things happened. And that show was done in a few days. And it was stuff like The Absolute Truth, which my wife will yell at me if she listens to this podcast, because she probably will, because she thought you were nice. Again,
why is this? Why do you have to put the quotes?
Agree to disagree.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it's like
unbelievable.
I think Holly's the likable one.
Well, again, it's right, because you're married, because it's the table you sit at. It raises your stock. If you're sitting with Gene Smart, this guy's got to be all right. If I'm next to Holly, it's like, okay, something's got to be all right with
you're good by you're nice by association.
Yes, exactly. So, but the absolute truth is, and this is true, I think a key moment for that show, and I don't know if you saw that show or if you remember that show, but the truth is, a lot of the reason it's good, and I just I watched it once on the 10th anniversary, and I started watching a little bit last night. The truth is, that show tone was set in large part by the fact that my wife picked up the phone before me that Friday night. And I overheard Joel saying to her, we're doing a telethon for 9/11. And my wife, who's like the loveliest person, something about this really rubbed her the wrong way. And she goes, that's a horrible idea. He goes, this is not about stars. This is not about celebrity. This is about, these about real life heroes, or whatever emotion she was feeling, which we were all feeling at that time. But I literally took the things she was telling Joel, sort of yelling at him a little bit, and I wrote them into the opening, which is what Tom Hanks says in a much nicer tone than my wife, who was mad. But that was sort of, that's sort of what set the tone for the writing part of the show. I didn't sing the songs, but even things like Joel, that I remember that first call, he goes, I think we have, and he told me a few artists, he goes, can you think of what song would be right? And the one in fact, the one that I think my favorite song of all time, and one that I'll tell you, literally just last week, I had the same experience. I had this, this was not like a time when you had like iTunes and you had everything, and I don't even file my records. I'm like you, I'm a mess. Yeah. So, but when he said, we have Stevie Wonder was one of the artists, and I said, there's a song called Love's in Need of Love Today. And it's my favorite. I've always loved it, but just that title was what came to my mind. But the weirdest thing that ever happened was when we rehearsed it 20 years ago in about an hour or two, he came in, I remember that day, when he did the number and we put the lyrics up, I realized this song from Songs in the Key of Life, I think the greatest album of all time, I think it's 76, it is 9/11. It literally is someone saying, I'm an announcer, we're looking at the world, it looks like everything's ending, but we have to react by sending our love in right away. It was as if he had written it in 1976 for a telethon after a tragedy like that. And the weirdest fact is, I had not heard it in that time.